Thanks for joining us for another edition of the Coyote Corner video blog alongside Jay Elsen. I'm Alex Heinert talking some USD Coyote football, and Jay, for the Yotes, another week, another tough loss against a ranked opponent, 45-26. They fall this weekend here on Senior Day in the Dakota Dome to Illinois State, number 7 team in the country. You know, the final score makes it feel like, well, you know, they really weren't in the football game. But after a slow start, trailing 21-0 right off the bat, they come back. They make this a one-score contest in the fourth quarter. It didn't quite finish that way.
Right.
But talk about what you saw from the Yotes on Saturday, what you saw well.
Well, again, I think we saw some heart. I mean, it was a team that got down, really was on its heels early on, just like they were the week before against Western Illinois. But for the second consecutive week, they battled back. And so, obviously those big holes against good teams, you just can't afford them. You can't really afford them against anybody, but especially when you're playing the kind of competition that they are in the Valley. And so that hurts you, you know, from the onset. But, you know, they battled back, and they really did compete hard. I thought the defense got better as the game wore on. You know, they gave up a lot of yards on the ground, but, you know, they were tightening up. They were forcing turnovers, and the offense, you know, took advantage of a couple of those turnovers and turned them into points. And, you know, all those things that you need to do to have to win football games. You know, and then we've seen a lot of that here over the last few weeks. They've had pieces of that, just not enough of them. And so that was the story again on Saturday. And so you get down a 21-0 hole, but you battle all the way back. You get within 8, and that's without, you know, a couple of key guys. They lost a couple more starters to injury. Miles Bergner was one of them, so they had to get a little creative with their extra points, their kickoffs, and their punts on Saturday, because Miles does so much, and you really realize how much he does when he's not there anymore. So good again to see this team just continue to fight and show that they haven't quit on the season. Regardless of where their record is. And that's not always an easy thing to do. So certainly it's a minor thing, but also an important thing, I think, building for this team going forward, knowing that this team has the mental makeup to fight through adversity. And they've had a lot of it, but they're still working.
Yeah, you mentioned the record now, 2-9 in the season, 0-7 in conference. Their chance to finish the year, though, out with a win, and a big one at that coming next week against South Dakota State.
It's a pretty big one?
It's kind of a big game. Yeah, a little bit.
Feels like it's got some extra to it.
A little bit, yeah. Jack's coming off 2 straight wins and a big win this weekend. They win 59-24 against Western Illinois in the snow, and in a game they put up all kinds of crazy offensive numbers. Yeah. They've won 2 straight since losing 2 in the middle of the season. They have an outside shot still to make the playoffs. You got to think the Yotes' blood is going to be running a little bit higher for this one.
Well, and I wouldn't even call it an outside shot, to be honest with you. I think if South Dakota State wins, they're in. If they lose, it's not a crazy thought to think, just given the strength of the Valley, to think that they still could be in.
That Youngstown loss
it's a little harder.
Yeah,
the Youngstown loss last week, certainly, and the fact that Youngstown has to go and play NDSU in Fargo this weekend certainly all plays into it. But the Jackrabbits certainly have something to play for here, in that they want to assure themselves a spot in the playoffs, and I think a win does that for them. So the Coyotes are, you know, they know that, and certainly aren't going to forget about that between now and Saturday. So that's going to add a little fuel to the fire of what's already going to be an intense game, and one that's going to be hard fought. Obviously, there's a lot on the line here, just in terms of bragging rights, and the Coyotes, you know, haven't beaten the Jackrabbits since the series resumed in 2012, and they want to do it, and they'd love to do it on their home field. And keep them from the playoffs while doing it. And so if all that falls into place, great. But it is going to take a pretty stellar effort against this Jackrabbit team, which obviously coming into the year we all knew was talented. They've taken some lumps here and there. Injuries had something to do with that too. Starting at their quarterback spot with Austin Sumner. He's back. He's playing well. Zach Zenner is still there. Jake Winicky, the wide receiver, has just exploded onto the scene as a redshirt freshman. So you know, the Coyotes are going to have their hands full. This team's playing very well right now.
Yeah, you mentioned some of those weapons, and that's what makes this team so tough to defend right now, because they aren't just one-dimensional with Zenner running up the middle. The fact that Sumner is back, again, 6 touchdowns last week. He's now the career leader in passing touchdowns at South Dakota State, and he's got not just Winicky, but you've got Jason Schneider. There's a lot of guys they have to cover. How do you stop this team?
That's a great question. Obviously, Western Illinois couldn't figure it out. So, I mean, and credit to the Jackrabbits. I think they hit Western Illinois where they were the weakest in the secondary. And Sumner had a huge game, 366, 6 touchdowns, as you said. Certainly, you know, it starts with, you know, Zach Zenner for them. You know, I know that we just talked about how great Austin Sumner's been playing since he returned from injuries. This will be his 4th game back. But Zach Zenner is their workhorse. And you know that the Coyotes have been a little susceptible against the run. So you got to think South Dakota State's going to try and attack them there. And so if the Coyotes can, obviously, can you stop him? It's tough. NDSU's done it. Not a whole lot of other teams have been successful in that. And so, but slow him down. Don't let him break that big one. And because we've seen him several times over the last few years go for a 90-plus yard run. He's got that kind of speed, and he can get away from you in a hurry. So if you could slow him down and force Sumner to be the guy that beats you, it's not a great alternative. I realize that, but anytime you make a team more one-dimensional, we talked about how they're not one-dimensional. If you make them one-dimensional, then let the chips fall where they may and see what happens. But that's going to be a key. You can't let both of those guys have big days or you're in big trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked with Joe Glenn just a bit ago, and he mentioned how you got to throw the records out when these two teams play, and how it is such an emotional game and a fun game for both sides. And obviously it's been a tough season for USD, but again, what a great way to go out with an opportunity to play this game to finish things up.
You asked Joe that question. Just say, what's it mean? Hey, you get to go up here and play this team with a chance. And there's no guarantee that a win here over them necessarily keeps them out of the playoffs, but it's certainly going to hurt their case.
Sure.
And he just smiles. You know what it means to him. I mean, it just kind of oozes off of him. And when the head coach has that much passion for what this game is, the players are going to, the other coaches are going to have that. The fans certainly have it. The administrators certainly have it. But just looking at it, you can just read it on him. How much this game means to him, and what a win against South Dakota State to close what's been a disappointing season. No question about that. And it certainly isn't going to replace all that's gone wrong if they should go up there and win. But it's certainly going to make it a little less painful going forward into the off season.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I mean, it's going to be a tough test. We know that. But certainly the circumstances, the environment, the rivalry itself is going to make it a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. I know that.
Absolutely. 2 o'clock this Saturday is the start. We actually have coverage beginning at 1 o'clock, a full hour pregame here on Midco Sports Network. Tom Neiman, Hank McCall will have the call. Jay will be on the sidelines.
Yeah. Weather in it.
It's going to be mittens and gloves and the whole
beard,
business.
Right?
Yeah,
the beard should
exactly.
help, right? Got to cover the dome. With the beard.
At least the front of the face is going to be in good shape. But a lot of fun this weekend. Again, a full coverage coming to you on Midco Sports Network. Again, at 2 o'clock kick, 1 o'clock pregame, full half game, post game, all sorts of great stuff.
Yes.
Jacks, Yotes, what more can you say?